What's going on, everybody? This is Sarah Teacher again. Today's video, I'm almost certain I'm going to get a ton of kind of like vicious, brutal feedback for people who watch this. Today's video is my personal MLS power rankings for MLS teams across both divisions, mainly from a stacking perspective, right? Teams that you might want to have full stacks of, teams you might want to stack just the defense or the offense, maybe not both. Teams that just seem kind of lackluster, maybe have like a gem here or there, but you don't really want to stack at all. And then teams that just confuse the hell out of me. So it's all kind of in between. These are hilariously bad takes. I know we're only about like a month into the season. We've had like 4 games for every team across the season so far, and so we're super early. These are just my gut feeling takes. I know I'm usually like a stats guy. I usually dive into things like FBref and Transfermarkt for a lot of stats. But today's video is really just what is my gut feel about teams that you should stack, teams that you should maybe have a partial stack for, like a partially correlated stack, in offense or defense, teams that maybe you should just avoid stacking, really focus on just some key gems within that team overall, maybe just some teams to avoid entirely. So just my gut feeling. I will say to start off the video that I don't necessarily watch every team really closely. I have watched pretty much every team at least once or twice this season. I am on the East Coast of the United States. It's a little hard for me to watch West Coast teams, so I don't watch West Coast teams as much. But I have seen every team at some point this season. And so they're just my street, shoot from the hip, gut feeling, no stats driven power rankings for these MLS teams in terms of stackability, basically, right? Who you can stack, who you might want to stack, you might want to avoid because you just might not get that much success from a stack. So without further ado, let's jump into my power rankings from a Sorare stacking perspective for the MLS season so far. All right. Now, I've kind of divided this into different tiers, right? So we're going to start with my S tier teams. The teams that I think you can really have a great shot at winning rewards weekly with a full stack top to bottom. Now, when I say top to bottom stack, I mean you want a goalkeeper, you want a defense, you want the midfield, and you want an offensive correlated stack, right? You want guys from top to bottom, full 5-man stack, and you're pretty much bound to win something good at some point this season based on what I've seen or what I expect very soon from each of these teams. Now, these teams are probably kind of like the no-duh. If you check the conference standings for teams like LA and Philly, they're towards the top of it. Now, Philly and LAFC have looked really good on both sides of the field, right? Both sides of the pitch. Their defense has been solid for LAFC. Crepeau, their defense has looked really good. Philly's defense behind or in front of Andre Blake, I should say, basically good as always, right? They're always good pretty much every year. Their offenses, right? You can't go wrong with Carlos Vela. Christian Arango is actually appears to be fully healthy and should be starting regularly for LA again. For the Union, their offense has been surprisingly potent. And it's surprising because their main designated player, their main new star striker, Mikko Ora, who just came from the Danish league, he hasn't played almost at all. I think he got like some sub minutes a couple of games ago, but he actually like had like a leg strain or a thigh strain or something like that, some kind of injury like that, which caused them to not really be able to start since then or play since then. So they've really been really good in terms of scoring goals without their, quote unquote star player, right? The guy that they brought in to be their main goal scorer, their main target man up front. So, from my opinion, if you're looking for like a top to bottom stack, Philly and LAFC probably really can't go wrong. That would be kind of expensive for Philly on the defensive side because Andre Blake is, he's like 0.7 ETH, 0.8 ETH for the rare. LAFC would be pretty expensive to get Crepeau and Vela, but I mean you're paying for performance, right? Like you're gonna get what you pay for. And so at some point in the season, like I think if you give like a full 5-man stack for either of those teams, you're gonna win something good, right? You're gonna have a really good week once in a while, and you're bound to win some stuff. And you're really gonna get what you pay for if you can actually like shell that money up front for a 5-man stack. The Revs in Columbus, I also consider my S tier. I think that once the Revs are healthy, and they have not been healthy, right? They've been missing Matt Turner, Kessler. They missed Andrew Farrell for a bit, right? Their Iron Man, and their defensive line in the center back position. But I think once they're healthy, you're gonna want a full 5-man stack for the Revs too, right? Like Heel, Boo, Buxa, Leggett, Turner. Like these are guys who are gonna win you a lot of rewards once they can all be on the field at the same time. Columbus, they have looked really good. I know last year Columbus Crew were not that great looking, but this year Arthur's healthy. Sorry, Arthur's healthy. Looks like Ailer Room is having a bit of a bounce back season. Their defense overall is having just a bit of a bounce back season. They weren't great against the San Jose Earthquakes, right? They gave 3 goals to them, even though they were a man up. But overall, I think every part of that team has played pretty solid so far. So if you can afford to get Zelleran, if you can afford to get Miguel Berry, because I think Berry's looking like the #1 guy for the foreseeable future up front. Like I think they're going to win you some rewards too. They have one of the strongest home field advantages really in all of MLS. Home field advantage is really big in the MLS, and especially at the Crew Stadium. So if you know the Crew are playing at home, I mean, you really can't have a much better 5-man stack because they just dominate a lot of teams at home. Their home streak is pretty insane in terms of their win and loss record for quite a while. All right, next tier, which I call the A tier. And when I say A tier, I'm talking about teams that might be more affordable 5-man stacks and also appear that they could be towards the top of the MLS this season in terms of stackability, right? Players stacking on both the defense and the offensive side. The Red Bulls and Nashville have historically been good defenses, or they're typically like teams that don't give up a lot of goals. Nashville's kind of an interesting case because their stadium right now is actually in the process of being finished, right? Still under construction, and so every game that they've been playing so far, and will be playing for a little while longer, have been road games. They have not had a home game yet. They will not have a home game for at least a while longer. So eventually, they're gonna have a ton of home games in a row once that construction finishes on their stadium. So I personally think, yeah, Nashville's record right now doesn't look amazing, right? They don't look amazing in terms of like just the stats or the data, right? The table, but they're gonna have a ton of home games coming up in a row in succession, and they are a really really formidable home team. I think they're almost as good as the Columbus in terms of like home field advantage based on what I saw last season out of them. Austin, the only position I think would be super expensive for Austin would be Jerusi. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Their star attacking guy, right? Guy scores a lot of goals. He's really really good in the ball. But in terms of like their midfield and their defense, I think they're one of the more affordable stacks. And Austin looks really good. I know again we're early, we've got a bit of a month into the season, but especially at home, like they're kicking butt, like they're really kicking ass across the games that they played so far. And so I honestly think Austin's gonna have a pretty good season. They look way improved from last year. Nowhere near the wooden spoon contenders like they were last year. I think from what I've seen, and again this is just my gut feel from what I've seen, they could be a playoff contender, right? A team that actually finishes in the playoff spot this season. They look way better, and I think a team that's worth stacking so far from what I've seen, and they're definitely more affordable than say like an LAFC stack or a New England Rev stack for sure. All right, B tier teams where I think you might want to look into stacking part of the team, so stacking either the defense or the offense, but probably not both. Now we know the Sounders. You might be wondering like why the hell are the Sounders in this part of the video? Why are they part of like the B tier? Well, even though they have a lot of stars, where they have Christian Rodon, they have Joao Paulo, they have Rui Diaz, Jordan Morris, they have these ton of bona fide MLS stars. They are really really injury prone. Rui Diaz has missed I think all the seasons so far. Nico Lodero is pretty much made of glass. Like his bones basically shatter upon like the breeze blowing on him. So this team just cannot stay healthy. So, from my opinion, you honestly don't really want a Seattle stack because you're not going to get a lot of chances this season from what it looks like to play the five best Seattle players all at the same time. Because at some point, either one or more than one of them is going to be injured and be out for a little while, and that's just going to ruin the stackability of the Sounders, right? If you're trying to go for a stack, you probably want to focus on the players who are healthy, right? So maybe like the defense and Stephen Fry and Arriaga, or Fry and Yamar, or in terms of the offensive side, maybe Ruidiaz once he's finally back. He's not super injury prone from what I've seen, and then maybe like Rodon, right? Lodero kind of seems like a guy you want to ignore or stay away from because I mean he truly is made of glass. Every time he comes back, he's out again almost immediately. It's pretty crazy how injury prone that guy is. So that's kind of why I include the Sounders on my B tier list. They just it's just gonna be so hard for you to stack them all at the same time because of the injury proneness that the team seems to be facing. Right, they seem pretty snake bitten as far as injuries go. Chicago defense looks like it might be the best this year. Their defense is amazing in front of Slonina. They've hardly given up any goals, I think, at all this season. Really solid. Offense, pretty lackluster. They actually did okay, I think, in their last game. I think Shabelko had a brace. But it doesn't look like, yet again, you're going to get a lot of offensive production from the Chicago Fire. So if I were you, if I were going to stack the team, you definitely want to focus on the defense 100%. Same thing for Orlando right now. I know right now you can't really even buy a Facundo Torres card for Orlando, their new winger from Uruguay, who looks pretty good. And I think when they release cards for Orlando City, getting a Facundo Torres might be not a bad idea because he looks pretty promising. But for right now, their offense kind of looks out of sorts, looks a little disjointed. They seem to be okay in the midfield, like their possession midfield and passing has been pretty good, but just their finishing hasn't been great. And so for right now, in terms of offensive stacks, I'd probably wait on Orlando until things click a little bit. And last but not least, for Atlanta, I mean, I don't know if I have to say much about Atlanta. If you've been watching the MLS at all so far this year, offense, really promising, right? You got Joseph Martinez, who looks pretty good. He looks like he could have a pretty solid season. Luis Araujo is a guy that I'm pretty high on. I think he's very talented, very technically gifted. But that defense, man, I mean, that defense, if you watch that, I think it was the last game they played, um, they just they just gave up so many glaring mistakes. Tamili in goal is like a shadow of his former self. He's like a shell. He just doesn't seem like he's got it all together like he has in previous seasons. So if you're gonna play Atlanta at all, you just want to avoid the defense right now, man. Like it just looks so disjointed. I know they've missed some Alan Franco for a while. I know they've missed having like all their starting in the back like they had last season. Like their last season, they were pretty consistently healthy in the back. But man, like as a professional team, some of the mistakes that they've been making on the defensive side have been egregious, like horrible, horrible mistakes. And so for right now, like I said, we're only within the season, but based on my gut feel from what I've seen from them, you want to avoid a full Atlanta stack because that defense is just not trustworthy to win you some good rewards in the near future until they can really get their crap together, basically. All right, C tier teams. Now, when I tried to make the tiers for this video, I kind of had a hard time thinking about how to sort of organize these teams and where to rate them. I don't think these teams are particularly bad. As a matter of fact, I think the Timbers, once more is healthy and they're fully healthy, could be pretty good. Same thing for Minnesota United when Fragapane is fully healthy again. But these teams look like they're really, really home field oriented. Teams you might want to avoid using when they're away, but teams you might want to think about using when they're at home because of their really strong home field advantage. So in my opinion, they're kind of lopsided in terms of usability, in terms of both home and away fixtures. So away fixtures you might want to avoid. They haven't looked spectacular, but at home, man, do they look like they could take on anybody in terms of both defense or offense or both. One team that I really want to focus on, which is interesting. I don't want to talk about all these teams because I haven't watched a lot of the Timbers and the Rapids. I think I watched like one game for each. I think maybe even two games for the Timbers. But I've watched a lot of Minnesota United. I am a Tyler Miller fan. I own a Tyler Miller rare card, which has been unfortunate because Dane Sinclair seems to have maybe won the starting job for the foreseeable future. But that defense is really, really holding up. I think either way you cut it, no matter who's in net, that defense is going to be really solid. My plan was originally going to have a Tyler Miller and a Dubasi defensive stack because again, like you probably want to stack the defense, not the offense. Their offense has been pretty lackluster, but their defense is awesome. But I think no matter who's in net, whether it's Sinclair, whether it's Miller, a defensive stack for Minnesota United would be pretty favorable when they're playing at home. Like they are going to have, from what it looks like, a really tremendous home record, especially a home defensive record. So I'm all for anybody out there going for a Minnesota United defensive stack, primarily when they're playing at home. Not really away, but definitely when they're at home. All right, D tier clubs. Now this is where I think I might start to get some hate from some people watching this video because I included some pretty popular teams on this, especially teams that have some really, really expensive players. That's New York City FC, as well as Sporting Kansas City. New York City FC, right? They have Sean Johnson, one of the most expensive goalkeepers on the market. They have Tati Castellanos, one of the most expensive strikers on the market. And then for KC, you have Shallowy, you have Johnny Russell. If you've been playing Champions America at all, you don't even need me to tell you who Johnny Russell is because he's been one of the best strikers for a while, really since he came over to the MLS. Just scoring like crazy last year, super expensive. So why did I include those guys on this list? Well, essentially, I don't trust what I've seen from them so far. New York City, their offense has been just really, really inconsistent. Defense has been just as inconsistent. If you watched the game that they played against the Philly Union, which I did, I watched that game in its entirety. They lost at home to Philly 2-0. Right, they could not score Philly at home, right, with their strong home field advantage at Yankee Stadium. Sporting KC, I know they're also kind of injury riddled, kind of like the Sounders have been. I know they're missing Alan Pulido up front. They got Shelton instead. They had some injuries and some stuff going on in the midfield. Like Gotti Kinda, I don't think has even seen the field yet. I might be mistaken, but I think he's like either barely played or hasn't seen the field at all. So they've looked bad. Like their scoring has fallen off a cliff. Their defense has it been even worse than that. Like their defense again, just like completely just in the gutter. I don't know what happened to them defensively, but things have just gone awry. So I just don't trust them now. I think once their midfield is healthy, I honestly think that the midfield is the biggest problem. I think that's once their midfield's healthy, a lot of things will sort of fall into place defensively and offensively. But for now, while they have an unhealthy midfield, I really just don't trust using that team because they're not scoring goals against teams they should. They're letting in a lot of goals against teams they shouldn't. And I just expect better from Sporting KC. I think they'll come good eventually at some point. But for right now, from my gut feel, a month into the season, you probably want to avoid stacking them for the time being. Cincinnati, I've honestly been pleasantly surprised with what I've seen from Cincinnati. Their defense has been slightly improved this season. I know their first game of the season was like abysmal. I think they gave up like 5 goals, lost 5-0. But since that 5-goal drubbing at the start of the season, they've looked a lot better. They've actually looked pretty dang competitive in most of their games. So I think it's worth taking a look at the Cincinnati offense, especially. Brandon Vasquez looks like he might be having his breakout season. I think he's also an under 23 player, so that's some added utility too for the under 23 division. Still probably want to avoid a defensive stack. I think Matarrita, one of the best defenders, is also out. I think he just got injured and might be out for a little while. But their offense, man, like I think an offensive stack for Cincinnati might pay dividends across the season. That looks pretty promising to me. All right, my F tier. These are the teams that I would pretty much avoid stacking unless you're really on a pretty tight budget and you just want to stack no matter who it is in the MLS, right? You're just going for a stack and you don't care whether they're good, bad. You just want five guys, or at least a part of the team, because of their affordability. So the Quakes, Whitecaps, Montreal, and Miami, boy, they have looked pretty terrible. I personally had high hopes, for the Whitecaps and Montreal. I honestly was never high on the Quakes. They've been pretty mediocre for a while. Enter Miami, they pretty much had a complete roster overhaul. I think they let go like double digit number of players, over the offseason. So they're like almost their entire team is new, pretty much, apart from like their goalkeeper, and their forwards. Like pretty much everyone seems to be new. It's like a totally overhauled team. But boy, have they been disappointing. Montreal's been disappointing. Their defense has been terrible compared to what I thought it could be. Breza could be okay, but their defenders in front of Breza, man, they've just been a huge letdown. Also, they're not scoring as many goals as I thought. Kiedo is good. Mihailovic is very good, but just something isn't clicking up front that I thought would happen, which just has not happened yet. So for them right now, I probably just avoid stacking them. And then the Whitecaps are probably the most surprising of all these four teams, that I've put on the slide, that I'm showing you guys right now. I had really high hopes for the Whitecaps. They snuck into the playoffs last season. I think they were like in the eighth spot, the seventh or eighth spot. So they just snuck into the playoffs last season. They have a lot of really good talent in terms of Christian Dahome. They got Cavallini back. He was gone for a while, but he's returned from injury. They have Ryan Gauld, who I think is going to be one of the most expensive, attacking midfielders you're going to be able to buy once his cards drop. In I guess the next few weeks, cards seem to be they'll be dropping, very soon, at some point in April. So I think Gauld's gonna be like super expensive because he's really good, especially in terms of the silver matrix. But they cannot buy an offensive goal to save their lives. Like their defense looks okay. Their defense isn't great. So it's not like abysmal, but their offense has been a huge letdown. They've barely scored any offensive goals so far this season. I don't think Dahome has scored a single goal. I don't think Gauld has scored a single goal. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think Gauld is he hasn't been as great as he was last season when he came in, halfway through the season. But like they're just not scoring. Like they're having a really hard time scoring. I don't quite know what's happening. If you've watched more of the Whitecaps than I have, feel free to again to message me on Twitter or put a comment down below. But there's just something not clicking in the offense, and it's making me sad, man. Like I had a lot of high hopes for them. I actually owned Dahome, a Dahome rare for a while, and actually sold him because just something isn't clicking in that offense. So it's not really doesn't make sense to me to have an offensive stack for Vancouver when they're not scoring goals, right? You stack them to get decisives, and they're just not scoring decisives, on the offensive side. Defense could be possible, but from what I've seen so far, out of like their goalkeeper, out of their defense, it just doesn't really make sense to me to stack, either part of that team. Like until they get their crap together at some point later in the season, and hopefully they will. I just kind of think they're a team to avoid stacking, right now. All right, last but not least, I have some teams that I just could not quite figure out where to put, for various reasons. It's either they I just haven't watched enough of them, or I just don't know what opinion to have about them. Toronto, they've been really up and down so far this season. I know their offense will improve drastically, when Lorenzo Insigne comes over in the summer. Right, he's going to finish out the season with Napoli, and then in the summer window, he'll come over. So I think they'll be a pretty offensive team. They've already been pretty decent offensively. I've watched a couple Toronto games, and their offensive, gameplay has been pretty free flowing. Pazuelos look pretty good. Some of their young guys that they've been playing look pretty good. So I think they have a lot of young talent, that'll develop over the course of the season. So I think they could actually get better as the season goes on. But right now, like they're just up and down and all over the place. So I don't really know where to put them. Same thing with RSL. Their season opened pretty promisingly, but I just don't think it's gonna last. Like I don't think they can sustain the start that they've had. The offense, they basically have like no good offensive players other than like I don't know Damir Kreilach and I guess Bobby Wood. Like I wouldn't even consider Bobby Wood to be like a good player, but he's actually been pretty decent for them so far. You can't really buy his cards yet; they'll drop again soon. But like, I just don't see where goals are going to come from consistently out of Real Salt Lake over the course of the season. So, like I said, I know it's early. They've only played like 4 games or so right now. So I might be like pleasantly surprised by them over the course of the season. But right now, like I don't think their current performance is really going to be sustainable over the course of a full season, right? A full calendar season. DC United, kind of the same thing. Like I don't know if they can really sustain like decent performances. They looked pretty good to start. Their last couple of games haven't been great. I think they lost like 2-0 against Chicago. I haven't checked their match schedule lately, but I think they played Chicago last and lost 2-0. But like again, I just don't know where their offensive firepower is going to come from now that Ariel is gone. Ola Kamara seems to be relegated to a bench role. Also, they're missing Kevin Paredes, who was transferred to the Bundesliga. He was purchased by a Bundesliga team, and so once I think Fountas comes over, I think he'll actually be playing for them within a couple of weeks. He's like finishing up getting his visa from Rapid Vienna, so he'll be coming over pretty soon to fill a forward role or at least like a winger role. Not sure quite which one yet. They could be better, but yeah, like I just don't really see where their offense is going to come from unless Fountas like lights it up. So for right now, I'm going to reserve judgment on DC United. I'm not quite sure where they fit. I probably put them in like the D tier right now. If I had to put somewhere, right, put a gun to my head, I'd probably put them in the D tier. But I'm going to reserve judgment until I see what happens when Fountas joins within the next couple of weeks or so. Once he gets his visa stuff sorted out. Last but not least, Charlotte. They are a brand new team to the MLS. They're the latest expansion team. So there's not a lot to really go on in terms of like team history or team performance, especially like home and away performance. There's not a lot to go off of. They've looked really solid at home. Like I'll be honest, I was surprised at how or how good they looked against the Revolution. Some of the guys on the team look like they could be pretty good gems, like Swiderski up front, their Polish striker, Ben Bender, who I believe was one of the MLS draft picks that they had. He looks pretty good. I actually just saw a stat the other day. Actually, it might have been this morning about Ben Bender being one of the top goal scoring chance creators so far this season out of any team or any player. So that's pretty promising. So Ben Bender might be a guy worth looking at as a hidden gem on Charlotte. But again, because they're so new, because they haven't seen enough of them at home and away, I'm going to reserve judgment for them until maybe like another few games or so to get a little more of a sample size in terms of watching them play on both the offensive and the defensive side. But however, I'm kind of liking what I see from some of Charlotte's players, like Ben Bender, Swiderski. Could be some hidden gems that you might want to look into buying or stacking at some point this season when those cards release pretty soon, in what looks like should be the month of April. So that's kind of what I got for you guys. I know I went through this breakdown really, really fast. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who either disagree with me, who are fans of some of these teams, who think I have no idea what I'm talking about. And for all I know, you might be totally right. This is just, again, my gut feeling. I shot from the hip. I've only watched some of these teams like once or twice. I've tried to keep up with as many teams as I can. Like I do watch a lot of teams, but I obviously can't watch every game every weekend. So if you think I'm totally wrong, if you think I'm like way out of my league, if I've just made a huge mistake, feel free to let me know. But from my perspective, from what I've seen, from what I've followed and tracked so far this season, these are kind of my tiers for teams that look good in terms of their stackability, in terms of offense, in terms of defense, or in terms of both. So that's all I got for you. I'll see you next time on my channel, Sorare Teacher. See you, everybody.